Hi, I'm Ann Coulter. Welcome to my Substack. I have the author of the best book I've ever read today, Greg Mantell, who wrote Special Victim Status, the Era of Woke Journalism. Welcome. Thank you for coming, Greg.
Well, it is great to be here, Anne. Thank you so much for that introduction. I don't even, I'm flabbergasted. I don't even know what to say, but I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me that that you are responding to this book because there are things I wanted people to know.
It's amazing. Well, I don't know. It was 6 months ago. Nadine Strawson sent me. I guess it was a draft copy then, and I guess I got about halfway through, and it totally blew me away. Particularly the chapter I wrote about this week, the Ahmed Arbery story, and the way you write and the comparisons you make, the analogies, the analysis, the counting up of how many times the New York Times has started to use words like mass incarceration and when they started it. It's magnificent. It reminds me of me, except way better. Because I have to say, I chickened out on the Ahmed Arbery story. I don't know if I emailed this to you, but I saw their mugshots and I saw that one of them had used the N-word. And I just thought, you guys got to meet me halfway. And I knew it was going to be, a total railroad and just, squinted my eyes when I saw what the results were. But what you did was so brilliant. And we won't talk too much about that chapter because all the chapters are so great. And I wrote about that one. But to compare it to another case that was very similar, except the crime was a million times worse, the Christopher Lane case. I mean, going back and forth, and the things that the Washington Post, the New York Times, AP, the rest of them hid from the public in that story. The book is amazing. Everyone has to read this book.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I could just living your life, hearing the news, being exposed to all this, and as well as my background as a journalist, I just started paying attention to what I'm hearing and noticing patterns, and I would look deeper. And yeah, in that case, it was really flabbergasting because you see that the same thing is being done over and over again. But in that case in particular, it's what I call special victim status. And the idea is that there's more outrage over certain victims, people who, often in terrible circumstances, um, but Noam Chomsky said this in Manufacturing Consent, so I'll paraphrase him. Some people's lives are worth more than others, according to the media. And that's really, so in a way for me, it wasn't even about the crimes. I mean, it was, but it was about, the media coverage, what was happening and what was the media saying what was happening. And I was noticing this disconnect. And a big part of it, as you said, is selective outrage, selective reporting. Not, when I started listening to the 911 calls, getting under public records requests, getting the Burke County Sheriff video, tracking down all kinds of stuff over Georgia, some of which was sometimes the court didn't want to give me some stuff. That's another story. We could do a show about that sometime. But yeah, and then, but you don't say, for instance, the New York Times did a timeline of his shooting, going over the 911 calls, reconstructing what happened. And I've heard the 911 calls and I know what's in there, and I'm not hearing in the story what I heard in the 911 calls about, Larry English saying stuff was taken out of the house or out of the boat and things are missing. And the narrative that was being quoted in the media was the attorney saying, well, nothing was taken, or if it was, it wasn't worth very much. But, it was some kind of a satellite. I'm not a fisherman really, but I think there was some like a satellite GPS thing for the boat and a fish finder and construction equipment around the house, saws. He had a big live-in camper on the premise, full of personal belongings, I
And
imagine. The
lots of
boat.
cameras for a reason.
Yeah, a lot of stuff on that property, but we were hearing that there was nothing was taken, and that's just not what the 911 calls said. And what was worse was I started writing about this when before it had gone to trial, but even in the trial, when the defense attorneys tried bringing some of this out, it really got no media play. If you look at the evening news stories, it was the outrage, but there was nothing about, well, stuff was taken from the house, or they claim stuff was taken from the house, or whatever. It was just this innocent guy jogging down the street and gets blown away. And the other thing, what's really shocking, I think, is that well, again, I think it was being played up by the media that it was this innocent guy out jogging, as Christopher Lane was. You know,
Well,
if,
he
if
actually was an innocent guy out
Right.
jogging.
And truthfully, I mean, if it had been the same situation, I think it would have been just as horrible. An innocent person out jogging, Christopher Lane, I'm at Arbery who. But then, well, there was the little detour into the house, which had been a habit, and then into other businesses and other people's property, and criminal citation for trespassing from the Burke County Sheriff. His grandmother warned him to stay out of people's yards. Don't, the sheriff told him several times, people over there don't like that. The last thing we want is for him to get shot. 2 years before it happened, the police said to his face several times, you know, people over there don't like that. We don't want to see you get shot. And so, but what was even worse was that about 10 days before the shooting, um, Travis McMichael was leaving his house. I forget it was go get gas or something, leaving the house. And he went by Larry English's house and saw Ahmaud Arbery in the yard. And so he called the police. The police came out. The body cam was a little unclear, but I believe the police officer said so. There was something like 5 or 6 police there. 5 or 6 neighbors showed up. Like 10 people are going around that property looking for Ahmaud Arbery, and he got away. He was gone by the time the police got there. Because everybody says,
Jogging.
why didn't he call the police? Well, he did call the police, but Ahmaud Arbery was gone. And in fact, he even stayed in the truck when some of the other people went in the house. I mean, the police went in with their guns drawn. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
and I think you said Arbery, at least one of the times Travis saw him in there. Oh, and this Larry English, who was, I'm sorry, a total chicken shit and really hung these guys out to dry. He was the one who had the half-completed vacation house and, like you say, the boat and everything, and all of this expensive equipment. He had alerted the entire neighborhood. It wasn't
right.
just the
There were,
McMichaels, and the
911
police
calls.
told him, tell the McMichaels, because the father, I guess, used to be, I don't know, a marshal or something. So alert your neighbors, have the cameras there. There was another neighbor who was looking around that night. And one of the times, Travis, the son, went over and saw Ahmaud Arbery there. Arbery lifted his shirt. I don't know if there was a gun, but as if to show him that there was a gun.
Right. Yeah, and that was the other thing 10 days before. And so then the day that it happened, when he came running by, the media portrayed it as though they had never seen this guy out. It was somebody out of the blue. Well, actually, and that night, the police, they were showing videos. They were showing videos from when the neighbors were comparing notes. So the police, or one of the neighbors, I think Diego Perez or Larry English, had texted messages. Anyway, they were looking at videos from previous incidents. So everybody knew what he looked like because they
Mm-hmm.
were comparing notes. So when he came jogging by that day, or 10 days later, 11, whatever, 11 days later, he's like, there's that guy. And he goes,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's what started the whole thing. And that's a very different thing than Christopher Lane visiting from Australia, visiting his girlfriend, or going to school there and then visiting her and getting shot in the back by people randomly while he's out jogging. And then you get to the special victim status, where the outrage over the shooting, um as I say, and people are very justifiably talking a lot more about or concerned about media bias these days, but there really are specific techniques, which I thought was
Yes.
interesting, that you can quantify how it's being done. And I'm kind of a data person. It sounds like you are
Well, you
too.
sure are. And that's what was so impressive. I think most people think they're aware of the bias. Until you read this book, you are not aware of the bias. And I like how you go through these various propaganda techniques and describe them with footnotes and explanations of how and why these are propaganda techniques. So go through the ones for reporting a crime for the special victim. I liked those.
Sure. Well, to play up the outrage, one of the most obvious things is just the volume of stories. So
Yes.
yeah, you whether and again, it's not just anecdotal. Even though we've been talking a lot about Ahmaud Arbery and Christopher Lane. I analyzed 300 shootings of unarmed people, white, black, and Hispanic, and also shootings. Pardon me, I'm gonna get a little water here. Shootings of police officers as well. And so what you notice is that there is a definite trend in a pattern to who gets the most news coverage. Well, so first of all, so special victims, which would be black people, and there's also a gender component to this as well.
That was
Um,
interesting.
yeah, I know, because a lot of people don't know that, but there's actually, so women tend to get more coverage than men, and blacks people tend to get do get more coverage than whites and Hispanics. And so the Times and the Post, or I haven't done a wider analysis. I mean, I give examples from other things,